I want to hear cannons. Downfield, pull up, ball to the 5, touchdown Tampa Bay. Mike Evans does it again. Fire the cannons, Bucs.
It's first and goal. That's picked off. That's picked off. And who else? Rondé Barber. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers may ride to the Super Bowl with that one.
Third down, 18. Dropping Gannon, looking Gannon. Those up with the heads intercepted. 30. Derek Brooks 30. Brooks to the 25. 20. Derek Brooks all the way. There it is. The dagger's in. We're going to win the Super Bowl. And then the cannons come. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
36-30, your final score on Thursday Night Football as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers fall in overtime to Kirk Cousins and the Atlanta Falcons. A very entertaining game, but unfortunately Tampa Bay not even able to get the offense on the field for overtime. A 45-yard touchdown from Atlanta able to cap things off, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers fall to 3-2. The Atlanta Falcons improved to 3-2, and with this win, they now have the tiebreaker over Tampa Bay and will be first place in the NFC South headed into this weekend. A disappointing finish, but an entertaining game. Evan, your thoughts here?
I mean, especially in the first half, basically, I think, we're going to talk a lot about the defense in this one, and rightfully so, right? I mean, I don't want to get into it immediately, but the defense was not good enough, right? And injuries are injuries, but you can only make that excuse so many times, right? And they just couldn't come up with a big play when needed. But also, the offense executing down the stretch. And I think you're seeing the results of them just not being able to run the football, all right? And them just not being able to close out games by running the football. So that's an issue on offense, and that's something they're going to have to get corrected. Only 6, second half points from the offense, only 6. So, 2 field goals, couldn't get in the end zone in the second half. So really, a disappointing showing, I think, from both sides of the ball, in the second half for the offense. The first half, the offense was spectacular. I mean, they were on fire. But, and then I think you saw tonight, is particularly on the defense, I think you saw a team that just 4 days ago played 110-degree heat, right? And I'm not making the excuse, but they just looked gassed, right? They just looked exhausted. And then, of course, this game goes to overtime. And basically, I thought when it went to overtime, the Bucs had to win the toss. And obviously, there's nothing they can do about that. It's all luck. But as soon as the Bucs lost the toss, I was like, I don't think this defense has anything left, right? I just don't think they have anything left. There was an issue with tackling. I think that's, a sign that they're gassed. The pass rush was okay at times. At times, Kirk Cousins had too much time, and I thought the defensive game plan, particularly, was pretty poor. So we'll get into all of it. But all around, a full team loss, I'll say, because even though as good as the offense was in the first half, only scoring 6 points in the second half, having an opportunity to close the game out twice, and not being able to do it either one, that falls on the offense too.
Yeah, you had mentioned being able to close games like this out with the run game, and I got to tell you, they were a Bucky Irving fumble away from closing this thing out, I think. They get the football back with a chance after the Levante David interception off of Kirk Cousins late in the fourth quarter, and it's a late but ultimately costly turnover that allows Atlanta to march down the field and get themselves back into this game, set up overtime, and ultimately take the win. So, yeah, this is a game that, honestly, for 3.5 quarters, I thought the Bucs were going to win. I legitimately thought up until the Bucky Irving fumble. I know that they were facing a couple of costly third downs on that drive, but I thought they were going to win the football game. It was an entertaining game. It felt like for the better part of the night on the offensive side of the ball, when they needed to respond, they did it. They did it efficiently. You could tell what kind of game it was going to be after that first defensive series where Kirk Cousins and the Falcons, they march right down the field and they score a touchdown. Well, the Bucs responded immediately. Baker Mayfield looked good. The offense looked good. Mike Evans got involved. 2 touchdowns for him tonight. We'll break down the numbers in a bit. But, yeah, a costly mistake there in the final few minutes, and that just goes to show you how something like that can change the game entirely.
So here's where this game was ultimately lost, in my opinion. Levante David intercepts Kirk Cousins on a 4th and 15, which I didn't think Atlanta should have gone for that anyway. I think with 3 timeouts, they probably should have punted. They go for it. You make them pay, right? Levante David gets the interception, gets down at the Atlanta 35. The next Buccaneers possession is 3 plays, negative 14 yards, and runs off 30 seconds. Runs off 30 seconds because the Falcons had 3 timeouts. They used all 3 timeouts. So, okay, whatever. But negative 14 yards. And yes, there was a penalty in there that didn't help. But that was your chance, right? That was your chance. Even as it turned out, getting it in field goal range, kicking the field goal, getting it 33-27, making this you have to score a touchdown, not just get a field goal to tie the game, probably would have ended it, honestly. And the offenses couldn't do the simplest of things. All they had to do was really not screw up in that situation, and that's exactly what they did. So the offense kind of got what they deserved on that, right? I mean, you can't, in that spot, you have to be able to secure at least 3 points in that spot. If not, it's just completely, a first down ends the game, obviously.
Yeah, execution errors down the stretch are something we're going to talk about, but I also want to make sure we mention, to a certain degree, the officiating down the stretch here as well. We haven't done this so far this year, and it seems like every year there's only a couple of games where we have to do this, but there was an egregious bit here late in the 4th quarter among the NFL officiating crew they had for this one. So Tampa Bay ball, 2nd and 13 at the Atlanta 31. They are in field goal range, and there is a missed face mask. So the ball is spotted back at the Atlanta 41, and Tampa Bay is placed outside of field goal range.
Well, not just word, it's a missed face mask. It was called a penalty on Tampa Bay.
Right.
Or the hold.
Yeah. So it would have been offsetting penalties. Regardless, it wouldn't have put the Bucs back any more yardage than they were. They're forced to punt on that drive. They give it back to Atlanta, who only needed a field goal. They march down the field. They get that field goal to tie it up. So your thoughts here on the botch face mask call, and honestly, a couple of other soft calls tonight. There was the KJ Britt Drake London collision, the unnecessary roughness toss for that one. So your thoughts on that, crew?
Yeah, I mean, look, officiating, I don't want to pin it all on them, right? Because ultimately the Bucs had plenty of chances, but yeah, it's a clear miss. It's a miss that can't really happen. In that scenario, it can't happen, and it was obvious, right? The broadcast thought that's what they were calling, right? The broadcast, when the flag initially appeared, they thought it was calling, it was going to call a face mask on Atlanta, and it just didn't work out that way. So tough couple of series for Bucky Irving. Obviously has the fumble, so hopefully he can keep his head up high. I thought the officiating was a little inconsistent, but Atlanta had some penalties, not go their way either in some critical spots, right? And they were able to overcome that at times, and the Bucs just weren't able to overcome that. So I Bleav that was, I think it was a 2nd down play, right? So, I mean, you still had 2 more chances to gain some yards and you couldn't do it. So, it wasn't like that was an absolute critical one. And again, just get in the field goal range. That's all you have to do. It wasn't like you had to get the first down or you had to get a touchdown or anything. Just get in the field goal range, and wasn't able to do it. One thing that I think is going to, I don't really want to bring it up, but I am going to bring it up. Going to haunt Bucs fans is when the Bucs threw that screen, which I was fine with, but and it's a tough play because that's the design. Like I get it, but Mike Evans just streaking down the field alone. Doesn't even have to score a touchdown. He just catches the ball and goes down. The game's over. If Baker sees it, but again, that's the play design. It's supposed to be the screen there, whatever. But yeah, again, that's one of the many missed opportunities in this game. And when you miss that many out, you can maybe miss 1 or 2, right? But in the NFL, when you have a chance to put a team away and you miss opportunity after opportunity after opportunity, this is going to be the final result. So, just overall, makes next week's game at New Orleans darn near a must win. And I think it makes kind of the next 2 divisional games, right? Because you have New Orleans, then you have Baltimore, then you have Atlanta at home. I don't see how you can get swept by Atlanta and then still win this division. I think that becomes a must-win game as well in this scenario now for the Bucs.
It was a brutal night for the Buccaneers defensive scheme. The Falcons had the answers, and you look at the box score, the numbers, the yardage, the sheer offensive production is going to show for it. Kirk Cousins, 42 for 58, 509 yards through the air, 4 touchdowns and an interception. I mean, they were throwing the ball at will. He was 8 for 9 to start the game with a touchdown. I mean, they were picking on KJ Britt immediately. You could tell that was going to be in mismatching coverage from the first drive of the game. They had a big-time throw and catch to Kyle Pitts. He was active in this game. I think had 7 or 8 catches by the end of it. Really picking on the middle of the field. And for the Bucs, I think this is where a lot of the problems on defense stem from, and a lot of people, you'll hear them talk about it this week, but just no adjustments at all from Todd Bowles in the second half. And it was, we've seen this before where Todd Bowles doesn't adjust, but I don't think we've seen it to this capacity. We do have a $10 super chat from Deontay London here. He said, love the channel, guys. Tough loss tonight. We have to get our guys back healthy. Losing Whitehead late hurts. Always go Bucs. Yeah, talking about the depth in the secondary there. Losing Jordan Whitehead tonight. Tyke Smith went down. He was being evaluated for a concussion. Ultimately came back into the game, but he had a rough night. But again, this soft coverage, the underneath routes, these soft corner looks, these tight ends in the middle of the football field taking advantage of KJ Britt in coverage, who is not a coverage linebacker. I mean, it was fire at will for Zach Robinson, Kirk Cousins in this Falcons offense, and it was going to be that kind of game. We could tell very early on. You had 2 offenses here that were just firing away in the first half.
Yeah, and I think 2 offenses that were going to hit the middle of the field often, right? Look at Levante David's a good coverage linebacker, but he's not so good to be able to cover the entire middle of the field. So, KJ Britt was a mismatch, and he's had his moments, but we also know that KJ Britt's strength is not really, the coverage aspect of his game, right? He's had some good games, but we knew that before this game, right? That his coverage was not one of his strengths. So, again, it was a mismatch. They're missing Servassier Dennis. I think Dennis would have fared a little bit better. I mean, I'm not saying Dennis is, great in coverage, but would have fared a little bit better probably. And I mean, just again, it was a defensive game plan that was, to me, just way too conservative. Especially down the stretch. I get it. You're playing without your starting 2 safeties. You're playing with a linebacker who has not been very good in this game. Like, I get it. You're missing Cansey on the defensive line. However, he was playing way too conservative down the stretch. I mean, I get it. Wanting to protect the lead, not wanting the big play, right? And maybe that's why, right? With the 2 backup safeties, you don't want the big play. But at some point, I mean, and of course, the one time they play man and blitz is the last touchdown there. But you're playing 10, 12 yards off of the receiver and just giving them this cushion. Drake London is able to get 15 yards to set up the field goal for Younghoe Koo. I mean, just again, was not good enough. So it was a interesting game plan that I did not agree with, and to me it felt like Bowles was really kind of scared, a little bit scared of Cousins maybe going deep. Now we talked on the preview show about Cousins and throwing the deep ball, right? That Cousins was pushing the ball down the field pretty consistently last week against New Orleans. Maybe that's what Bowles saw, and he was a little bit scared that's what would happen again. But instead it was the intermediate stuff that really killed the Bucs. So that's going to be something that has to get corrected. And here's the thing though, everybody's like, oh, you got to get KJ Britt out there. Okay, who's going in? Because Servassier Dennis is on IR. He's not coming back anytime soon. And are you going to put JJ Russell out there? He's going to start. I don't know if that's a long-term sustainable thing. So it may just have to be, you may just have to deal with it and just sort of adapt to KJ Britt, and he's just going to have to play better. But an interesting defensive game plan that I just simply did not agree with.
Yeah, tackling was an issue, as you had mentioned at the top of the show, but there were countless plays tonight that I'm sure when we watch the game back, you'll look at. Bijan Robinson in particular did a really good job tonight of turning a lot of, -3, -4 yard plays into positive yardage. And it's just because of wimpy tackling. Guys aren't doing a good job. They're trying to go high. They're getting shoved off. I mean, Bijan Robinson is a tough running back to bring down. He made Levante David miss today. So don't get me wrong. He's a very talented back, very capable in that sense. But it was just sloppy. Sloppy execution, sloppy tackling, and too many big plays given up because the first guy was not able to wrap up. While we are talking about the defense as well, I want to mention the pass rush here, which is in an interesting spot. I mean, they are hurt all over, potentially even more hurt after this game. Yaya Diaby needed some attention. He ultimately came back in, but his presence wasn't necessarily felt. 4 sacks for the defensive line, 2 of those coming from Logan Hall, who I'd argue had maybe one of the better games of his career. He was a dog,
I think so.
especially in that first half. He looked really good out there. But a lot of your other interior guys are coming through on these other ones. Vita Vea got a big time sack, and then Anthony Nelson as well. You know, the sacks are nice, again, especially when you've been lacking them so far into the season, but it wasn't any meaningful pressure. It wasn't any pressure that stopped Kirk Cousins from throwing all over this football team. And looking at Atlanta's offensive game plan, I mean, when you've got a guy who throws the football 58 times, I know Baker damn near threw the ball 50 times last week, but it was working for Atlanta this week. We got another $10 super chat here from Deontay London.
Thanks a lot.
He said, really wish we got Mike and Chris more involved in the second half. We need to have a serious talk about Cody Mauch. Luke Gedeke will be back, but boy, is he a mismatch on this offensive line. We'll dive into the offensive production here in a few minutes, but Evan, your thoughts on the pass rush here as we wrap up the defense. And a $2 super chat really quick from Chris Higgins. Tough loss. See you Saturday, Evan. Let's go Mets.
Yeah, see you Saturday. Phil's in 5. But anyways, yeah, you know, it's looking, and I don't want to kick a man while he's down, but like prior to the injury, I didn't think Jordan Whitehead was very good in this game anyway. Like, you want to talk about missed tackles, he had missed a couple of tackles as well. And again, I think it was a team that 4 days ago just played in 110-degree heat, and I'm not. That's not an exact excuse, okay? Like that is not the reason they lost this game, okay? That's not the reason. But I think it's a factor, and I think this is a defense that, quite frankly, has been banged up, and they're just tired. And I think this 10-day break is going to do them well, and I think it's going to basically come down to, you know, how they come out in New Orleans, right? I think that's going to tell you a lot. Who's available in New Orleans matters, right? Hopefully, Jordan Whitehead thing, hopefully it's not a prolonged thing. Hopefully it's just a precautionary. He'll be able to be back. Hopefully, maybe Antoine Winfield Jr. It sounded like when Bowles spoke the other day, sounded like if this game was on Sunday, Kalijah Kancey might have been able to play. So they might get some reinforcements there. But again, I think this 10-day little mini bye week is coming at the perfect time for this team because they need a rest. They need a break. They've played a lot of football in the first 5 weeks, and I think that this little mini break here is going to be much needed for them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a chance to get your guys healthy, chance to hopefully get an update this week on Kalijah Kancey, as you mentioned. We got a good look at Antoine Winfield Jr. tonight as well on the sideline. Hopefully we hear something about him. Todd Bowles said, we'll wait and see as of last week. So any updates, of course, we will keep you updated throughout the course of the week. But yeah, the Bucs going to benefit from this 10-day break. Now, you know, losing a game like this, again, just like losing that Denver game, these are, albeit competitive here on primetime, these are winnable games. And you start to, again, look at the games that are left between now and the bye week all the way in week 11. And you're ramping things up with the quality of opponent that you're going to face. It's another tough division opponent next week with New Orleans. I mean, that game's going to be tougher than this one was. Yeah, you know, I'm not expecting a hot start the way that they did. We just have to wait and see. But it's going to be a tough game. After that, you're back on prime time. You've got the Ravens. You got Kansas City, San Francisco down the stretch. So, you know, there's a lot going on for the Buccaneers here. And when you're tallying wins and losses, it's really going to suck at the end of the year. To look at the way this one got away from them. But let's take a look at the other side of the football here, because believe it or not, there are some good things to talk about, and albeit it isn't a loss, we have got some milestones on the offensive side of the ball. My greatest of all time.
It seems like this is like a weekly thing, you know?
Yeah, every week it's history.
With this guy.
Yeah, every week it's history for Mike Evans. Not only does he get 5 receptions, 62 catches, and 2 tutties tonight, but he also notched his 100th career touchdown. So just to clarify, not his 100th career receiving touchdown, just his 100th total career touchdown. And there was a little bit of discourse about that because he did have a fumble recovery touchdown, I think in 2018. So the next one that he has will be the 100th reception. But it was hilarious because he gets that 100th career touchdown and immediately chucks the ball into the stands.
Well, he threw Tom Brady's ball into the stands as well. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, like I said, it seems like every week this guy's getting a milestone. So, okay, little trivia. And remember it now. Do you remember the game where that fumble recovery for a touchdown happened? Because I do.
Chicago.
It was on the road. It was not Chicago. It was against the New York Giants.
That was my second guess.
Jameis was running. He ran to the end zone, fumbled it in the end zone. Mike Evans recovered it, and ended up being a touchdown. So yeah, that's interesting. Because when you said that, I was like, I don't think he has a rushing touchdown. But yeah, that's a pretty cool milestone there for Mike Evans. And the good news about the offense as well is Baker Mayfield over 1.5 receiving, passing touchdowns hit, which a lot of people in the comment section, which by the way, thank you for all the support on betting the Bucs this week. Think it had something to do with it being a national game, but whatever, I'll take it. A lot of people were in the comments like, oh, the Baker's not gonna get that, Bacon, he's not gonna get the over 1.5. Tampa, Atlanta secondary. Well, he got in the first half, so you tell me. Yeah, I thought Baker was pretty good tonight. Again, it's a tale of two halves with his offense, though, right? And it wasn't like, I wouldn't say they were particularly bad in the second half. The last two drives were bad when they had an opportunity to put the game away, but like they just couldn't get in the end zone.
Couldn't finish
two,
drives.
two field goals, and if one of those turned into touchdowns, the Bucs they would have won this game.
Yeah. No, I agree. Just could not finish drives and couldn't get themselves into a rhythm there in that second half. They came out hot. They came out firing. Baker was confident in that first half, and it's because they were getting the ball out. I mean, they were getting their big receivers involved, but Baker was picking up right where he left off against Philly last week. And at halftime, shout out to the defensive coordinator for Atlanta. They made adjustments, and they did a much better job of getting after Baker Mayfield in that second half. I know he made some plays with his legs, but I thought we were going to be dealing with an injury, and maybe we'll get an update on his knee here in the next couple of days, but an awkward ending to one of the drives out there for him. He ultimately comes back and plays well. But yeah, just not explosive. Didn't feel like they were capitalizing as much on some of those close drives there in the second half. Baker, his night, 19 for 24, 180 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks. All 3 of those touchdowns in the first half. So again, the defensive adjustments by Atlanta, they took a look at what wasn't working in that first half, and they definitely were the better team, I think, in that second half.
Bucs threw the ball 8 times in the second half. That's all you need to know. And I mean, I get it. Sometimes situationally wise, right? Especially the last 2 drives, you're trying to protect the lead. I get it. There was somebody in the chat, said, I'm still wondering why our offensive coordinator decided to do 2 run plays on 2nd and 20 and 3rd and 23. I get what you're saying, right? But the thought process is you throw an incomplete pass, Atlanta gets to keep their timeouts, and you don't want that. The counter to that I would have is just throw a screen, throw a running back screen or a wide receiver screen, throw something safe, that's going to be complete, and be able to keep the clock moving. But I agree. I mean, they just, got too conservative and on offense. And, I think the difference between this week and last week was, last week, even when the Eagles were kind of making a push, they kind of kept their foot on the gas, right? And this week it felt like, especially on offense, they kind of took their foot off the gas and tried to run the football. And again, it's when you're not a good running football team, which, I mean, look, the reality is they're not. I mean, Rachaad White had 60 some yards. He had 56 on one play. I mean, he was not very good. Bucky Irving, obviously, with the late fumble. Like I said, you hope it doesn't damage the kid's confidence, but definitely might have, gone a long way in losing them that game. That was with like 2:50 left in the game. So would have taken it almost down to the 2-minute warning, would have put the Bucs right in the field goal range. And that's a big one. But conservative offense, you sort of, when you don't keep your foot on the gas pedal in the NFL, that's what you're going to get sometimes.
Yeah, it's a brutal look. It's an awful time for a first career fumble for Bucky Irving here in the regular season. Rachaad White, 10 carries, 72 yards, averaging 7.2. He did rip off that big 56-yarder in the second half, as you had mentioned. Bucky Irving, 9 carries for 44 yards, averaging 4.9. Now, this is another week in a row where the Buccaneers did get over 100 yards on the ground. So, I mean, between these two running backs, I know that we come away from these games saying, maybe Rachaad White could have run the ball a little bit better. Maybe Bucky Irving could have got some more carries. But regardless, I mean, when you look at the amount of 100-yard games they're having, context matters. But do you feel like the run game's getting any better, or do you think these are just kind of fluff numbers at this point?
You take out that 56-yard run, Rachaad White had 16 rushing yards on 9 carries.
Right.
Baker Mayfield had 42 yards.
Yeah. Bucky Irving, I think, had a big 30, 40-plus yard run as well these last couple of weeks.
Yeah, his long was 16 tonight. He had 9 carries for 44 yards. So, no, I mean, I really don't. I don't think the run game is improving much. I mean, it's getting a little bit better when you see Bucky Irving out there. And, look, I think Rachaad White's sort of getting the short end of the stick a little bit because, like, what the Bucs do well running the football, they do mostly for Bucky Irving, and what they sort of do poorly, like between the tackles, they're sort of giving to Rachaad White, so he's kind of getting like the mop up duty a little bit. And
yeah,
that sucks for him. But again, you need to be more productive than that. And Baker Mayfield, like I said, 6 carries for 42 yards. And I mean, obviously they're all scrambles. None of them are designed runs necessarily, but it's just, I don't see a solution coming quickly with this run game. I think it's going to be a work in progress. I think it's going to continue. I think it's going to have to develop basically the interior offensive line, right? And I didn't think Graham Barton played particularly well tonight either. I thought he had one of his tougher games as a professional. But
had a rough sequence there in the third quarter. I think he had a holding call and then the botch snap to Baker as well. There were just a couple of moments tonight that, it was not looking great for him.
Yeah, and then, Luke in the chat says offense put up for 30. It wasn't on the offense. Well, it kind of is when you get the ball twice and, you get the ball 2 times, need a field goal, you come away with nothing. So, especially when, again, we can talk about the face mask penalty all you want or whatever. But the fact of the matter is, they had plenty more opportunities and they simply blew it. I mean, it's and the Falcons have taken advantage of it. All 3 of the Falcons wins are like they're pretty much the same exact thing. Like it's the other team not taking advantage of your opportunities, and then the Falcons capitalizing.
Well, it was an entertaining game, but probably the sloppiest game from a discipline standpoint the Bucs have played all year. I mean, it seemed like a relatively clean first quarter, and then in the second quarter, the flag started to fly, right? And there were a lot of moments where it seemed like the Bucs were going to win this game by taking advantage of Atlanta shooting themselves in the foot. I mean, there were multiple drives tonight where they could not get out of their own way. They were driving the football down the field. They would get a timely penalty. They got to delay a game on the Younghoe Koo at the end of the game. He already missed 2 kicks tonight, technically 1, but he had 2 attempts. He went 0 for 2 on the same kick. So it bumped him from, I think, 47, delay a game, 5-yard penalty, bumped him back to 52 yards. So, things like that made a difference. But on top of all of that, it also seemed like there were a lot of potentially game-changing plays tonight. They blew it on the Bucky Irving fumble, but, you talk about the Tavier Thomas blocked field goal. Younghoe Koo missing those field goals earlier in the game. Again, the Bucky Irving fumble. But the Levante David interception, these are all plays that occurred that, made that much difference in the outcome of the game. And that just goes to show, again, how quickly those mistakes can catch up to you.
Yeah. And it's also, how much you have to capitalize on them, right? Because if you leave that door open, it just, again, the Falcons spiked the ball with 1 second left. And I mean, let's be real. The entire offensive line moved, but they're not going to call that. They're just not in that situation. They're just simply not going to call that. So I'm not going to be like, oh my God, the Bucs got screwed or whatever about that. The missed face mask, that's egregious. That in particular, right at the end though, they're just not going to call that. So the margin for error is just so thin in the NFL, and when you make that many mistakes in the fourth quarter and down the stretch, again, this is the result you are going to get. So now, this was a big one, right? This was a big one. This was an opportunity, a big opportunity wasted to go to 4-1, really take control of this division, right? Knock Atlanta down to 2-3. Be up 2 games in the division. If the Saints lost to Kansas City, the Bucs would have been 2 games up on everybody in the division. And now you basically have to win, I would say, 2 of your next 3, right? I think you got to win. And I mean, the game you can afford to lose is probably the Baltimore one because it's the AFC one, but it puts more pressure on you now to be able to go out in New Orleans, that tough place to play, and win that football game. And then, in Atlanta, in Tampa in week 8, you have to win that game. I mean, again, I don't see a world where the Bucs get swept by the Falcons, but still win the NFC South. I just can't see it. And also the other thing is, like, I don't want to remind everybody about this, but look, it's um the Bucs started 3-1 last year, and they ended up going 3-5. They ended up going to losing 4 straight games. So you don't want that to happen. When you're looking at the schedule, it doesn't get much easier, right? We talked about it earlier in the show. I mean, at New Orleans versus Baltimore versus Atlanta, then you go to Kansas City, then you play San Francisco. I mean, it does not get any easier these next 5 games here. So this was a big missed opportunity by the Bucs, and hopefully it doesn't come back to haunt them. Just like you said, right, about woulda, coulda, shoulda, basically, when you're looking back on the standings at the end of the year, right? Let's say the Bucs finish 9-8 and they miss the playoffs, or they end up being a wild card team instead of winning the division, and you look back at that game and you're like, man, that one game, like, that would have, instead of the 7 seed going to play the 2, they're the 4 seed hosting the 5, right? They're hosting a playoff game right now, 4th straight year division champion. Instead, here they are, in a tough spot. So, again, this is something that was avoidable, and I think that's the most frustrating thing. It's not that they just got beat. If the Falcons would have beat them, if they just got 31-21 or something, the defense didn't show up or whatever it may be, it was that they had multiple opportunities to put this game away down the stretch and failed at every single one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, when we start to talk about how good this Bucs team is potentially going to be down the stretch, you find yourself asking the same question that you kind of always do around this time. What's it going to take for this team to consistently play at the next level? I mean, they showed up to play tonight. It was a brutal loss in overtime. Don't get me wrong. A lot of things need to be fixed. We spent the first half of the show, for a lot of the people in the chat room who may have got here late, we spent the first half of the show talking about the defense, talking about the exploits in the middle of the field, the soft coverage from Todd Bowles, the lack of adjustments. So we covered all of that. But time and time again, we find ourselves asking the question of, like, how good is this team really? The lack of adjustments, the lack of execution. I know it was a short week, a very tough game, but every time the Bucs are in a position to set themselves up, right, create a little bit of distance from the rest of the division, do something to proactively make themselves a better team down the road, they can never quite do that. Now, they have a habit of exceeding expectations, which we talked about as well, and going from 3-5, playing 6-2 down the stretch, making the postseason, like, that exceeded expectations. But that doesn't mean that they were a good football team when they were 3-5. You know what I mean? So again, these are crucial moments where you have to look at this Bucs team and take the good with the bad, take a look at this performance and the way that, honestly, they kind of choked it away here. And you have to determine how good they're going to be. And again, it feels like, Evan, we are just here time and time and time again. Last year, towards the end of the regular season, they played really well down the stretch, but they had a chance to basically finish the regular season early, right? Yep. Put a cap on the NFC South, win the division against a beat-up New Orleans team when they were already playing hot, and they laid an egg. Tonight, maybe the stakes weren't as high, but you still had some division stakes on the line. You could have created a little bit of distance and kind of set yourself up as perfectly as you could have been to get ready for this tough stretch here. And now you're kind of once again putting yourself in a position to where it's like, oh, this is a must-win game.
Yep.
Because if you don't win this week against New Orleans and you go from 3-1 to now 3-3, feels like a 3-3 that could potentially snowball here as it did last year.
Yeah, and it's also 0-2 in the division. It would be, that's not good, right? And yeah, then you're staring down the barrel at, Baltimore and then Atlanta again and then Kansas City and San Francisco. And yes, the schedule gets easier after the bye week, but it's not really going to matter if you're like 3-7 at the bye week. Like it's really not going to matter. So yeah, they have to find a way out of this, right? And you're right. They had an opportunity last year, like you said, to end their regular season early, to finally put the cap on the Saints, right? To clinch the division at home against the division rival, lay an egg. Almost laid an egg in Carolina the following week as well. Almost. This year, they had an opportunity to go 3-0, prove that, like, all right, like, yeah, like you're one of the big boys, in the NFL, right? Against the Broncos team that the Bucs are more talented than. They laid an egg. And now tonight, they had multiple opportunities, and both of their games, both their losses have been, one was to a Broncos team which they were better than and should have won, but just did not execute, did not show up, and the other one was one they really should have won because they had it down the stretch and just choked it away. So those are the type of things that are going to come back to haunt you at the end of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we picked the Bucs to win before this game, but nobody's saying that the Bucs should have soundly beat the Falcons. Like, there was always going to be a chance that this game ended up being as competitive as it was. It's just disappointing to kind of see them lose it in the fashion that they did, man, because it was right there. It was right there. Like I said, you can't necessarily put it on one play because the defense allowing Kirk Cousins to do what he did. Yeah. I mean, that's just unacceptable, right? That is soft defense from Todd Bowles. And it's inexcusable. They'll go in the film room, they'll look at it, but I mean, really, Todd Bowles deserves just as much of the blame for not doing anything at all to change what the defense was trying to do in the second half there. So they deserve the blame, but this team was a Bucky Irving fumble away from probably putting it on ice. And
Bucky Irving fumble away, a face mask call away, whatever it may be. Baker Mayfield is calling audible basically and looking up and seeing Mike Evans away, a second away, right? I mean, if there's one less second on that clock for the Atlanta Falcons, they don't get that playoff. And, it just time and time again, missed opportunity after missed opportunity, and not going to get it done in the NFL. It's just simply not. So, and now your margin for error now becomes a little bit smaller, right? And just like you said, now the games become even more important because you had this game that you should have won and you let slip away. So now next week's game in New Orleans, where if you had won this game, yeah, it would have been nice. I mean, you almost could have clinched the division, basically, I think, if you won this game and then beat New Orleans. But like, if you lost to New Orleans, it'd be like, okay, you're 4-2. Now, I mean, you'd be 3-3, 2 straight division losses, heading into the toughest 4-game stretch the entire season. Oh man, things would be looking dire, and you would have your back against the wall, and you would have to have a performance like they did against Detroit this year, right, where you won where nobody else thought you would, in Lambeau last year where they won and not many thought they would. Those are the types of performances you would have to have down the stretch, and that's hard to do in the NFL consistently. So that's something where they're going to have to clean it up. And again, like you said, it does suck because they had a prime opportunity here, and now it becomes they kind of have to beat New Orleans next week, or things could get, as good as they were in the first 4 weeks, things could get pretty dark pretty quickly.
Yeah, still a lot of football left here in the 2024 season, but this is a Bucs team that has proven in the past that they can win football games playing with their back against the wall. Now, with that being said, you can't win games every single week playing that way. I don't think playing with your back against the wall every week is a recipe for success in the NFL, especially with a lot of these teams so far this season. But the Buccaneers take it on the chin. Thursday night football against the Atlanta Falcons and fall to 3-2. We'll see how this weekend shakes out with the rest of these games. But for right now, Atlanta does have first place.
And also, Atlanta has a lot of talent, right? I don't want to make it sound like it's frustrating because the way the Bucs lost, right? It's not as frustrating the loss. I think it's the way they lost. If you had said, "Oh, they're going to lose 36-30, defense is going to be crap, and they're just not going to be able to be enough," okay, but like the context of it, even somebody who just wakes up tomorrow morning and looks at the box score, oh, 36-30 overtime, okay, but like the context of it, right? As Joel Enrique, a member for 1 month of the Cannon Fire crew. Getting a nice little shout out. Hail Cannon Fire Crew. That's right, Joel Enrique. Appreciate you.
Renewing his sub. Thank you, Joel. The first official member of the
Yes.
Cannon Fire Crew. So consider him the not the mascot, but the Cannon Fire ambassador, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah,
But anyway, I mean, look, like Jesse Bates, hell of a football player.
yeah, had that
He
forced fumble.
two of them. The Bucs were able to recover the Godwin one. Mike Evans was able to recover it. And then he has the Irving one. Really good football player. And when he makes plays like that, it reminds me, I'm like, man, this defense misses Antonio Field Jr., right? Because I'm like, those are the types of plays that guy makes for the Bucs, and they don't have that right now. And they really could have used it tonight, right? It felt like they were probably one turnover short, pretty much, of putting it away. And also another thing, really quick before we head out of here. Basically, I thought the no huddle approach, right? I thought by Atlanta was smart because again, I think this was just a worn down Buccaneers defense, and I think Atlanta took advantage of that, and they repeatedly, time and time again, went no huddle, and it worked to their advantage. So I think this was a worn down Buccaneers team. The Falcons realized that, and when they were able to get quick completions over the middle of the field or in the intermediate areas of the field, they were able to hurry up and keep the Bucs defense on their toes, not allowing them to sub out, and just keeping that defense on the field. And eventually it wore them down.
Cannot fall behind in the NFC South division. The Buccaneers do have a 10-day break before they play the New Orleans Saints in Week 6. Thursday Night Football, they are the first team done. So again, they will enjoy this break. We will hopefully get a couple of injury updates for you. And a lot of the guys who have been playing hurt get a few extra days to get themselves back into the lineup, get as healthy as they possibly can, and try and get this team back to competing within the division. You got a big-time opponent next week in New Orleans. It's going to be a tough game. You want your playmakers on the field. You just talked about tonight the playmaking ability of Jesse Bates and how the Bucs are missing that in Antoine Winfield Jr. Like Levante David had a big-time interception today, but aside from that, you're still missing a couple of guys that are prone to making big-time plays. Jordan Whitehead didn't have the strongest night tonight, so having a competent safety who could maybe force a fumble, maybe even bring the heat.
Make that game changing play.
Right.
Jesse Bates made a game changing play.
He did, and the Falcons down the stretch were the team that wanted it more. They take the win, 36-30, your final score. But Evan, unless you have any final thoughts, I believe that is just about going to do it for this late night edition of the Cannon Fire podcast. We are pushing 1 a.m, and at one point we had over 200 people in here. So thank you guys for staying up late with us tonight.
Appreciate it. Yeah, this is awesome. Obviously, not the result the Bucs wanted, not the result we wanted, but you guys are awesome. All the viewers, you guys are the real MVPs of the night. Thank you all for tuning in. We know it's late. Hopefully you guys can enjoy your Friday, enjoy your Sunday. First Sunday of the full NFL season without Buccaneers football. So two of the next three are gonna be Sundays without Buccaneers football because the Bucs play Monday Night Football coming up against Baltimore. So yeah, appreciate you all. Thank you all for the support on the channel. We will have players to watch. Yeah. We will have most impressive and disappointing out Friday morning. So you guys can look forward to that as well. When you're going to bed now, right? Listening to the show, you can wake up and unfortunately relive a lot of the loss. But we will be talking about positives as well in there. So
subscribe to the channel for more great Tampa Bay Buccaneers content. Leave a thumbs up on the stream. And consider subscribing or becoming a member of the Cannon Fire crew. We had a lot of new faces in chat tonight, a lot of lovely, beautiful, smiling, happy people with nothing but positive things to say, so we truly do appreciate you guys. And also, shout out to everybody who contributed to the Wendy's Fund tonight. We had a lot of super chats, and we truly do appreciate you supporting the channel. Joel Elrican, the Cannon Fire crew, able to resub. And shout out to Joel again, earlier this week, was able to gift a couple of subs as well, or gift a couple of memberships. So if you're hanging out with us long enough, Maybe because of the generosity of another person, you could end up being in the Cannon Fire crew. But we appreciate you guys for your support. Regardless of win, lose, or draw, it has been a great season of support, and we do appreciate you. Follow the show on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as well. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show. And of course, Tampa Bay Buccaneer news as it happens. Before we get to Evan's information, I just want to recap this week's bets. Bet Online, one of our title sponsors here on the show, partnered with Betting the Bucs, and we put together a list of parlays for you this week on Thursday Night Football. Just wanted to recap very quickly how we did. So we had the Bucs money line plus 1.5 was what I was able to get it at. I think it moved anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5. So basically between 1 and 2.5. Well, the Bucs lost. So we didn't hit that one. We had over 22.5 receiving yards for Rachaad White. Did not hit that one. That was brutal.
I believe he ended with negative.
Yeah. I think at one
negative
time.
6.
Man. We did hit on Baker Mayfield over 1.5 pass touchdowns, and we did hit on on Mike Evans over 4.5 receptions. The anytime touchdown for Chris Godwin at plus 150 did not hit. So definitely not the best week. But again, I mean, that's the nature of the beast. You got to, I guess, take what you can get. And honestly, like I think we were on a decent pace if the offense didn't just completely implode in that second half there.
Yeah, the Bucs would have won the game, and maybe one of the touchdowns is Chris Godwin. You know, who knows? I mean, if that's the thing, you know, that could be the difference. So, take it on the chin, right? We got to do just what the Buccaneers are going to be doing. You know, they're going to be taking this one on the chin, and hopefully, just like the Buccaneers, betting the Bucs will bounce back next week.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, maybe Rachaad White could have gotten a successful screen pass. He's prone to break one for 15, 20, 25 yards every now and again, but we'll get him next week. So stay tuned. And thank you to Bet Online for sponsoring the show. You can find my co-host Evan on social media, Instagram and Twitter at EvanNFL. And if you check out his written work at BucsNation.com, you might learn something. You got anything on the slate this week? You got a lot of time on your hands.
I do have a lot of time on my hands, but we will be doing the day after reactions, which is basically, you know, pulling stuff from Twitter, seeing what people are saying, seeing what the people of social media. I know that's a lovely place to be sometimes, especially after a game like this, but I am going to be pulling some stuff there. So we have the day after stuff, probably take a little bit of a break and then come back, you know, next week, you know, with all the coverage coming up for the Saints game. So a little bit of probably a 3-4 day break, watch some playoff baseball, you know, like I said, you know, go Phils. But, and basically, yeah, we're going to be back on Bucs Nation, so stay tuned for that. As for the YouTube channel here, if you guys are listening on audio, we appreciate you listening on audio, but if you want a little bit more content, you can head over to the Cannon Fire Podcast YouTube channel. Check out, we were just talking about Betting the Bucs. Betting the Bucs is a series that we do weekly. So if you want to see Betting the Bucs for next week, you're going to have to wait a little bit, but you will eventually see it. You'll see most impressive and disappointing shortly after. Like I said, when your head hits the pillow tonight, you wake up tomorrow morning, it might be up. Who knows? But we will have plenty of content for you guys throughout the week, every week of this NFL season. So be sure to be subscribed to the Campfire Podcast YouTube channel, not just for the live show here, right? Not just for the post-game shows, the game previews, but also content literally, I Bleav, 6 out of the 7 days of the week. So pretty good stuff.
Last but not least, you can find myself Instagram and Twitter at Rhetticus, RHETTAKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back. For the Bucs, they look to take advantage of this 10-day break, get healthy, hopefully get some of their starters and stars on that defense back in the rotation. They got to get ready for another NFC South test in the New Orleans Saints next Sunday. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off from my co-host, Evan Wanish. We will talk to you guys later this week with more Tampa Bay Buccaneers updates. We'll see you in the next episode. Until then, and as always, thank you for listening. And go Bucs.